By the time my granddaughter called me from the title company in Lexington, my own son had already forged my name on a loan for $215,000 against the farm, the 90 acres my daddy bought on Troublesome Creek in 1958. I did not know that yet. I want you to understand the order of things, because the order is the whole story. On the morning Crystal called, I was hanging wash on the line behind the house, the way I have done for 60 years, the way my mother did before me, in the same yard under the same black walnut tree that was already old when I was a girl. I am 79 years old. I taught school in Knott County, Kentucky for 36 years. I have buried a husband, a daughter, and both my parents. I am not a woman who is easy to surprise. But I will tell you, when the phone rang inside the house and I came in with my hand still wet and pressed it to my ear, the voice on the other end was a voice I had not heard in 4 years. Mama? Only one person in this world ever called me Mama, and I had not laid eyes on her since the spring her mother was buried. I sat down at the kitchen table. I said, "Crystal, honey, is that you?" She said, "Mama, I need you to listen to me, and I need you not to be scared." That is how I knew it was bad, because nobody tells you not to be scared unless there is something to be scared of.
Let me tell you about Crystal before I tell you what she found. Crystal is my daughter Brenda's girl. She is 29 years old now. The last time I held her, she was 25, at her mother's graveside up on the hill behind Little Zion, in a black dress that did not fit her right because she had bought it that morning at the Walmart in Hazard on no sleep. After the funeral, she went back to Lexington, and the family came apart at the seams, the way families do when the one person who held it together is the one they just put in the ground. Brenda was the one who held us together. I did not call Crystal enough. I will own that. An old woman in a holler tells herself that the young have their own lives, that they do not want to be bothered by a grandmother who still hangs her wash on a line. So I told myself that. For 4 years, I told myself that. And the whole time, I missed her like a tooth. On the phone that morning, she was talking fast, the way she did as a child when she was trying not to cry. She said, "Mama, I work at a title company now. I examine titles. I make sure the property is clean before a loan closes." I said, "I don't know what that means, honey." She said, "It means your name came across my desk this morning, on a mortgage, for the farm. And Mama, it is not your signature."
My name is Opal Sturgill Caudle. I was born Opal Jean Sturgill on the 9th of November, 1945, in a farmhouse on Troublesome Creek in Knott County, Kentucky, in the heart of the eastern Kentucky coalfields, in a room my daddy had wired himself with a single bulb hanging from the ceiling on a cloth cord. My daddy was Hobart Sturgill. He went into the mines at the age of 14 at the Blue Diamond operation over in Leslie County, and he came out of them at the age of 40 with a cough that never left him and enough money, saved $1 at a time, to buy 90 acres of bottomland and hillside on Troublesome Creek. He bought it in 1958. I was 13. I remember the day he came home with the deed. He laid it on the kitchen table and he smoothed it flat with both hands, the way you would smooth a tablecloth for company. He said, "Opal, this here is ours. No man can put us off it now." He had spent 26 years underground to be able to say those words. My mother Della made cornbread that night, and we ate it with milk, and there was nothing else. And I have eaten in fine restaurants in Lexington since, at my son's insistence, and I have never tasted anything better than that cornbread in that kitchen on the night my daddy owned the ground under his own feet. That is the land. That is the ground a man with a pen tried to take from me in an afternoon, 67 years later, without ever once getting his shoes dirty. I married Carl Caudle on the 2nd of June, 1965, at Little Zion Old Regular Baptist Church, the same church where I had been baptized in the creek at the age of 12. Carl was a quiet man. He had gone into the mines like his daddy and my daddy, at the Scotia mine, and then at a smaller operation up Carr Fork. and when the mines started closing in the 80s, he came back to the farm and we worked it together. Tobacco, while there was still a tobacco program, cattle, a big garden, hay off the bottom. Carl did not say much, but Carl noticed everything. He could look at the sky and tell you whether to cut hay. He could look at a heifer and know she was sick a day before she showed it. And a man across the table at a stock sale, he would tell you after in the truck, "Don't do business with that one." And he was never wrong. I have thought about that a great deal these past months. I have wondered what Carl would have seen in our own son's face that I did not see. Carl died on the 14th of March, 2023. Black lung, the doctor said, and a heart that had carried too much for too long. He died in our bed, in the house my daddy built, with his hand in mine. The last thing he said to me was about the farm. He said, "Don't let it go, Opal." I told him I never would. I meant it more than I have ever meant anything.
Carl and I had 2 children. Ricky was born in 1968. Brenda was born in 1971. Ricky was the one who left. He was bright, I will give him that, and I taught school long enough to know bright when I see it. He did not want the farm. He did not want the creek or the hills or the church. What he wanted was out, and he got out on a scholarship to the university in Lexington, and he never really came back, except at Christmas and except when he needed something. Ricky went into real estate and then into mortgage lending. He wore good suits. He drove a car that cost more than this house and barn together, and he told me so more than once, the way some people tell you the price of a thing, as if the price is the same as the worth. Brenda was the one who stayed. Brenda married a boy from Pippa Passes and lived 20 minutes from me her whole life. She brought Crystal to my kitchen every Sunday after church. She helped me put up beans in the summer. When Carl got bad, it was Brenda who drove him to the doctor in Hazard. Brenda who sat with me in the waiting room. Brenda who never once acted like her own mother and father were a burden. Brenda died of breast cancer in 2021. She was 49 years old. I have outlived my own child. There is no word in the English language for what that is. I have looked. There is a word for a widow and a word for an orphan, and there is no word for me.
When Brenda died, something broke in this family that I did not know how to fix. Crystal was 25. She had been close to her mother the way Brenda had been close to me. Sunday kitchens, hands in the same bowl, the whole inheritance of women passed down through cornbread and canning and the small daily work of caring for people. And then her mother was gone, and Crystal did not know where she fit. There was money after Brenda passed, not a great deal, a small life insurance policy. And there was an argument about it. There is always an argument about it. And Ricky was in the middle of that argument, and things were said at my kitchen table that I will not repeat, because some things you do not repeat, even when the person who said them deserved to have them repeated. Crystal left after that. She finished her schooling in Lexington, took a job, built a life 200 miles from this holler. And I let her go because I was grieving my daughter, and I did not have it in me to fight for my granddaughter too. That was my mistake. I want to say that plainly because this is a story about my mistakes as much as anyone's. I should have called her every Sunday the way her mother used to bring her to me. I should have driven to Lexington. I should have done a right smart of things I did not do. But here is the thing I have learned, late, the way old women learn things. The people who love you do not always need you to deserve them.
After Carl died, Ricky came around more than he had in 20 years. I will not pretend I did not welcome it. A widow in a quiet house welcomes the sound of her own child's car coming up the gravel. He brought groceries, he took me to dinner in Hazard, and he sat at the table where his daddy had sat and said, "Mom, you shouldn't have to worry about any of the paperwork. Let me handle all that. You've earned a rest." I want to tell you how that sounds to an old woman. It sounds like love. It sounds like a son who finally, after all the years of suits and distance, wants to take care of his mother. And I was so glad of it and so lonesome that I did not ask the questions a school teacher of 36 years ought to have known to ask. He started taking my mail. The bank was sending me junk, he said, predatory offers, the kind they targeted widows, and he would sort through it so I would not be bothered. He set up something on my account so the statements went to him. He said it was to protect me. I let him do it. I handed my own son the keys to everything I had, and I called it gratitude, and I thanked God for him at Little Zion on Sunday mornings. There is an old saying in these mountains, "The fox is gladdest when the hen thanks him for God in the hen house." I did not remember that saying until it was nearly too late.
In the fall of last year, Ricky brought me papers to sign. He laid them on the kitchen table, the same table where my daddy had smoothed out the deed in 1958, and he had a pen ready, a nice pen, and he was already talking before I had my reading glasses on. He said it was a property tax thing, a homestead exemption, he called it. He said, "Mom, this'll lower your taxes. Everybody our age does it. You just sign here and initial these." I asked him if I should read it. He laughed, the easy way he has, and said, "Mom, it's 40 pages of legal boilerplate. I read it. It's the same form they all use. You don't want to spend your afternoon on this." And God forgive me, I signed it. I signed where he pointed. I initialed where he tapped his finger. I did not read 40 pages of legal boilerplate because my son told me he had read it, and I trusted my son the way you trust your own blood, which is to say without thinking, the way you trust the floor to be there when you put your foot down. It was not a homestead exemption. It was a deed of trust, a mortgage, or part of one, the part that needed my hand on it, or the appearance of my hand on it, to make the rest go through. I had just signed the first paper in the taking of my daddy's farm, and I poured my son a glass of sweet tea, and I thanked him for thinking of my taxes.
The letters started coming a few weeks after that. Not to me, to Ricky, but one of them slipped through. The post office in this county is run by people I taught in the 3rd grade, and a girl named Tammy Hall put a letter in my box by mistake, addressed to me from a mortgage company in Ohio I had never heard of. I opened it. I did not understand it. It thanked me for my recent loan and listed a payment amount and an interest rate and a figure at the top that made my stomach turn over. $215,000. I called Ricky. I read it to him over the phone, and he had an answer ready before I finished. He always had an answer ready, I see that now, and the answer was smooth and quick, and it made me feel foolish for worrying. He said it was a refinance. He had refinanced the farm into a lower interest rate, he told me, to save me money on the taxes and the insurance. It was all part of the same thing I had signed, and the letter had gone out by mistake, and I should just throw it away and not let those people upset me. Then he said, "Mom, do you trust me or not?" And there it is, that question. Do you trust me or not? I have come to believe that is the most dangerous sentence in the English language, because the honest answer is almost never a simple yes, but it is built so that the only answer you can give without feeling like a hateful old woman is yes. I said yes. I threw the letter away, and I did not sleep right for a month, and I did not know why. Now I will tell you what was happening 200 miles away in Lexington that I knew nothing about. My granddaughter, Crystal, had taken a job at a title company. Her work was to examine the history of a piece of property before a loan could close, to make sure the person borrowing against it actually owned it, free and clear, with no liens or fraud in the chain. She was good at it. Brenda's girl was always good with detail. She got it from her mother, who got it from me. On a Tuesday morning in the spring, a file landed on her desk for a cash-out refinance on a property in Knott County, Kentucky. She does title work for the whole state, so a Knott County file was not unusual. But the legal description was, she read it the way she reads 100 files a week, half awake, until she got to the meets and bounds, the old surveyor's language that describes the exact lines of a piece of ground, and she read the words Troublesome Creek, and beginning at a white oak, and a name she knew better than her own, Opal Sturgill Cottle, her mama's farm. She pulled the signature page, and she sat there and looked at it, because Crystal had grown up watching me sign things, report cards and church rolls and birthday cards with a $20 bill inside, and she knew my hand. And the name on that page was spelled right and shaped wrong. It was not my signature. It was somebody's careful idea of my signature. And the loan officer of record on the very same page was her uncle, Ricky Cottle.
Crystal told me later what she did in that moment, and I want to tell you because it matters. She did not call the company's fraud line first. The police could wait. Even Ricky. She did not call him. She called me, her grandmother, the woman she had not spoken to in 4 years. She told me she had her hand on the phone for 10 minutes before she dialed, because she did not know if I would even want to hear from her after all that silence. She thought maybe I blamed her for leaving. Maybe I was on Ricky's side. That is what 4 years of my not calling had done. It had made my own granddaughter wonder if I would take the side of the man stealing my farm over the side of the girl trying to save it. I will carry that. But she called. And when she said, "Mama, it is not your signature," I did not argue, and I did not faint, and I did not, God help me, defend my son. I said, "Crystal, honey, get in your car." There was a silence on the line. And then she said, in a small voice, the voice of the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap during the long sermons at Little Zion, "You want me to come home?" I said, "I have wanted you to come home for 4 years. I was just too proud and too sorry to say it. Come home." She was in the driveway by dark.
Crystal came up the gravel a little after 8 o'clock that night in a small gray car with Fayette County plates, and she sat at my kitchen table, and for the first hour we did not talk about the farm at all. We talked about her mother. We cried, both of us, the way you cry when you have been saving it up for years and you finally have the one other person who loved them the same way. Then she opened her laptop and she showed me. She had printed it all. The deed of trust I had signed in the fall, the one Ricky called a homestead exemption. It was a mortgage, and there was a second set of documents, a closing package, with a signature page that I had never seen in my life, dated a day in January, with my name signed on it in an ink I never touched. There was a notary stamp on that page. A notary in Lexington had certified in writing that Opal Sturgill Cottle had appeared before her in person on that January day and signed that document and shown a valid Kentucky driver's license. I have not driven to Lexington in 11 years. My license expired in the spring of 2024, and I never renewed it, because where would I go? I was not in Lexington that January day. I was right here on Troublesome Creek. Crystal looked at me. She said, "Mamo, where were you on January the 9th?" And I knew, because January the 9th is the day before my birthday, and I always have my heart checked the week of my birthday. I said, "I was at the cardiologist in Hazard. They have me on a monitor. There is a record of every minute."
That record turned out to be the thread that pulled the whole thing apart. But I am getting ahead of myself, and Crystal would tell me to slow down, the way I used to tell my 3rd graders to slow down when they read. So let me slow down. Here is what my son had done, laid out plain, the way Crystal laid it out for me over 3 days at this kitchen table.
Ricky had used his position. He was a licensed loan officer. He knew the forms and the people and the soft places in the system to take out a cash-out mortgage against my farm, $215,000. He had needed my signature on the early documents, and for those he had simply put the pen in my hand and called it a tax form. But for the final closing, the law required me to appear before a notary, and I would not have appeared because I did not know any of it was happening. So somewhere between the fall and January, my signature was forged, and a notary either looked the other way or was lied to, and the loan closed. The money went into an account I never saw. Ricky had been making the payments out of it himself to keep the letters from coming, which is why I had only ever seen the one that Tammy Hall put in my box by mistake. He was going to drain that $215,000, and when the payment stopped and the foreclosure came, it would have come for me, for my name, for my daddy's ground. Carl told me not to let it go. My own son had set it up so that it would be taken and so that I would look like the one who lost it.
I did not sleep that first night after Crystal showed me. I sat up in the front room in Carl's chair, the one nobody sits in, and I let myself feel it. Because I have learned you have to let yourself feel a thing before you can decide what to do about it. My boy, my firstborn, the bright one, the one I sent off with a cardboard suitcase and more pride than I had any right to. I thought about him at 8 years old, riding the school bus I drove for 2 years to make extra money, sitting in the front seat so he could be near his mama. I thought about him learning to read at this very table, his finger under each word. And I thought about that same hand, 50 years later, signing my name to take my home. I did not get angry. That surprised me. I waited for the anger, the way you wait for a storm you can see coming across the ridge, and it did not come. What came instead was a kind of cold, clear quiet. I have felt that quiet exactly twice before. Once when the doctor told me about Brenda, and once when Carl took his last breath. It is the quiet of a thing that cannot be undone. You stop arguing with it. You start working. Before the sun came up, I knew 3 things. I would not lose the farm. I would not scream at my son. And I would not do either one of those by myself. I would do it the way my people have always survived these mountains. With patience, with witnesses, and with the law on my side instead of against me, for once.
The next morning was a Sunday, and I did something I had not done with any real heart in 2 years. I got dressed for church, and I took my granddaughter with me to Little Zion. The congregation is small now. The old people are mostly gone, and the young people are mostly in Lexington or Cincinnati, or dead from the pills that came through these hollers like a flood. But Brother Estill still preaches, the way he has since before Crystal was born. And the singing is still the old lined-out singing, where one man calls the line and the rest answer, the oldest music in these mountains. When Crystal walked in beside me, there was a stir. The old women remembered her. One of them, Hazel Sloan, who has lived up the next branch from me for 50 years, took Crystal's face in both her hands and said, "Branda's girl, Lord have mercy, you come home." After the service, I told Brother Estill the whole of it, in the churchyard with the graves of my mother and father and husband and daughter on the hill above us. He listened the way a good preacher listens, which is to say he did not rush to talk. Then he said something I have held on to. He said, "Opal, there is a difference between forgiveness and foolishness. The Lord asks us for the one. He never once asked us for the other." I had been afraid, you see, that to fight my own son was somehow unchristian. Brother Estill set that down for me right there in the churchyard. He said, "Protect what Hobart bought. Then you can worry about Ricky's soul." In that order.
On Monday morning, Crystal and I drove to Hazard to see a lawyer. Her name is Sharon Mullins. She is a woman about Crystal's age who came back to these mountains after law school when she could have gone anywhere, and she does elder law and property law out of a small office above a pharmacy on Main Street. I want to say something about that because it matters to this story. People always say the young ones leave, and they do, but some of them come back. Sharon Mullins came back. Crystal came home. The mountains are not only a place people flee, they are also a place people return to when they remember what is here. Sharon listened to the whole thing and looked at every page Crystal had printed. She is not a woman who gets excited, but I watched her go still in a particular way when she got to the notary page and then to the printout from my cardiologist showing the heart monitor data from January the 9th. She set the 2 pages side by side on her desk. She said, "Mrs. Caudle, on January the 9th, this notary swore under the penalty of perjury that you stood in front of her in Lexington and signed this, and on that same day, your heart monitor has you here in Knott County, 200 miles away, with a timestamp on every reading." I said, "That is correct." She said, "Then this loan is built on a forged signature and a false notarization. That is not a misunderstanding, that is fraud, and it is the kind of fraud that comes apart completely once you pull the right thread, because they had to lie on paper, and the paper does not change its story the way a person does."
Sharon told us the first thing we had to do before any else was prove the land was clean to begin with. So we drove from her office to the Knott County Courthouse. The clerk's office there is a room I have known my whole life. My daddy filed his deed there in 1958. I have been in that room for marriages and for the settling of estates, and the woman behind the counter, Patty, is the daughter of a man I taught to read. We pulled the chain of title. That is the record of every hand the land has passed through. It is a beautiful thing, a chain of title, when you stop to look at it. It is the story of a piece of ground told in the names of the people who loved it enough to put their names on it. There was Hobart Sturgill, 1958. There was the man he bought it from, and the man before that, back and back into the 1800s. And then there was me, Opal Sturgill Caudle, by inheritance when my daddy passed in 1990. Clean, no liens, no mortgages, free and clear, exactly as my daddy had said the night he laid the deed on the table. No man can put us off it now. Until the line at the very bottom, the fraudulent mortgage recorded last January. Patty made us certified copies of all of it, the whole chain going back over 100 years, and the false line at the end that did not belong. I held those copies in my lap the whole drive home. 100 years of my people's names. And one lie.
Over the next 3 weeks, we built it. And I do mean we, because Crystal did not go back to Lexington. She called her work and arranged to do her job from my kitchen table. She said she could examine titles from anywhere there was internet, and the phone company ran a line up this holler 4 years ago. And she stayed in her mother's old room, and every evening we worked. Here is what we gathered. And I am telling you the plain list of it because this is the part people skip, and it is the part that wins. We gathered the certified chain of title. We pulled my cardiologist records, signed by the doctor, showing where I was on January the 9th. There was the affidavit Sharon drew up, where I swore I had never seen the closing documents and never appeared before any notary. And there were the bank statements Crystal pulled, showing where the loan money had gone and who had been spending it. And then Sharon did the thing that turned the key. She filed a complaint with the Kentucky Secretary of State against the notary, whose entire commission depends on never, ever certifying a signature from a person who was not in the room. That notary, faced with losing her license and facing perjury herself, did what frightened people do. She told the truth. And the truth was that Ricky Caudle had brought her the document already signed and told her my appearance was a formality. That was the thread. Once she talked, the whole thing unraveled, exactly as Sharon said it would. A lie on paper does not change its story.
I never did scream at my son. I want you to know that, because I think you might be expecting it, the way these stories sometimes go. There was no confrontation on the porch. There was no throwing of his things into the yard.
I am 79 years old, and I have buried half the people I have ever loved, and I did not have a scene like that left in me, and I would not have given him one if I had. What happened instead was a letter on Sharon Mullins's letterhead. It went to Ricky and to the mortgage company in Ohio. It laid out in cold and perfect order every single thing we had gathered: the chain of title, the heart monitor, the affidavit, the notary's confession to the Secretary of State. And it gave the mortgage company a choice: rescind the fraudulent loan and clear the title within 30 days, or face a lawsuit they would lose, alongside a referral to the federal authorities, because forging a federally regulated mortgage is not a small thing. Ricky called me the day he got his copy. I let it ring. I will be honest with you. I sat and looked at his name on the phone, my own boy's name, and I let it ring until it stopped. Then I called him back, because I am his mother, and a coward hides, and I am not a coward. I said, "Ricky, I know what you did. I have proof of all of it. The lawyer is handling it now, and you will deal with her, not with me." And then I said the thing I had decided in Carl's chair that first night. I said, "I am not going to talk to you about it, but I want you to know that I know, and I want you to live with the fact that the one who caught you was Brenda's girl, the one you ran off."
The mortgage company did the math, the way companies do. A lawsuit they would lose, plus a federal referral, plus the notary already talking, against simply rescinding a fraudulent loan they never should have closed. It was not a hard decision for them. Within the 30 days, they rescinded it. Sharon got a release recorded at the Knott County Courthouse, in the same room where my daddy filed the deed, where Patty made us the copies, and the false line of the bottom of my chain of title was struck through and marked void. The farm was clean again, free and clear, exactly as it had been from 1958 until last January. I drove to the courthouse the day it was recorded. I did not have to. Sharon could have mailed me the paper, but I wanted to stand in that room and see it with my own eyes, the way my daddy must have stood there 67 years before, with a deed in his hand and 26 years of coal dust in his lungs. Patty handed me the certified copy of the release. She said, "It's yours again, Miss Opal," clean as a whistle. I stood there a minute. I thought about Carl saying, "Don't let it go." I thought about my daddy smoothing the deed flat on the kitchen table. I thought about 90 acres on Troublesome Creek that 4 generations of my people had held, and that a man with a pen had tried to take in an afternoon, and had not. Then I drove home up the gravel, and Crystal had supper on, and the wash was on the line where I had left it the morning all of this began.
People ask me, and they have asked, because word gets around in a county this size, why I did not send my son to prison. The fraud was provable. Sharon told me plainly that if I wanted to press it, the Commonwealth would likely take the case, and Ricky could face real time. Forging a mortgage is a felony. He had earned whatever came. I thought about it for a long while, and I want to tell you my reasons, because they are not the reasons you might think. It was not forgiveness. I am not there, and I may never be, and Brother Estill says I do not have to rush it. It was not weakness, and it was not a mother making excuses for a son who stole from her. It was a choice, my choice, the first thing in this whole sorry business that was mine to decide instead of something done to me. I had spent 36 years in a schoolhouse, and I know what a record does to a life. I watched it happen to boys I taught, good boys, who made one bad turn and never got clear of it. And I knew that putting Ricky in a cell would not give me back 1 acre or 1 night of sleep or 1 Sunday with Brenda. What I wanted, I already had. The land was safe. The truth was on paper, where it could not be argued away, and Crystal was home. So I let the lawsuit be the punishment, the money he owed, the license he lost, the standing he will never get back in this county. And I kept the prison for myself to decide, and I decided no. Not because he deserves mercy, because I deserve peace, and those are not the same thing, and I am old enough to spend the difference however I please.
Crystal stayed through the summer. She kept her job at the title company, working from her mother's old room, examining other people's land, while she helped me hold on to mine.
In the evenings, we put up beans, the way Brenda and I used to, the way my mother and I used to. The whole long line of women with their hands in the same bowl. She fixed things too. She has her grandfather's hands, it turns out. The screen door that had been sticking since before Carl died, she fixed it. She got the old tiller running and painted the portrayal. One evening in August, we were sitting out front, the two of us, watching the lightning bugs come up out of the bottom the way they have every August of my life. And she said, "Mama, I think I want to move back. Not to this house, I'm not crowding you, but to the county, maybe Hazard, close." I did not say anything for a minute because I did not trust my voice. She said, "Is that all right?" I said it was more than all right. I told her that her great-grandfather bought this ground so that his people would always have somewhere to come back to. I told her that was the whole point of land, the only point that ever mattered. Not what you could borrow against it, what it could hold for the ones who come after. She put her head on my shoulder, the way she did when she was small during the long sermons, and we sat there until it was full dark, and the bugs filled up the whole bottom with light.
It is fall again now, a year near about since the letter came in my box by mistake and started all of this. Crystal found a little house in Hazard, 20 minutes down the creek. She comes up every Sunday after church, and we put dinner on the table, and the kitchen has voices in it again. Ricky I do not see. He moved away from Lexington, I am told. The lawsuit took most of what he had, and his license is gone, and a man cannot work in lending in this state with fraud on his record. I do not know where he is. I am his mother, and I think about him, in the early mornings mostly, before the day fills up. I have made my peace with not having peace about him. Brother Estill says that is allowed. The farm is clean. The release is recorded. I have the certified copy in the top drawer of my dresser, next to my daddy's original deed from 1958, the one he smoothed flat on this table. 2 papers, 67 years apart. Both of them say the same thing. No man can put us off it now. I am 79 years old. I still hang my wash on the line under the black walnut tree. I still drive myself to Little Zion on Sunday mornings. And on the worst day, when I think about my boy and what he chose, I go out and I stand on the ground my daddy bought, and I feel it holding me up, the way it has held up all of us, all this time. That is what land is for. Not borrowing, holding.
I want to tell you something before I let you go. My daddy spent 26 years in a coal mine that gave him a cough he carried to his grave, all so he could buy 90 acres and say 4 words at his own kitchen table. No man can put us off it now. A man with a pan and a nice suit and an easy laugh nearly undid all of that in a single afternoon. He was my own son. He knew the forms and the soft places and the one question that stops an old woman from reading the fine print. Do you trust me or not? He forgot one thing. He forgot that a deed is not the land. A deed is just paper. He could forge the paper, but the land was never the paper. The land was the people who stayed on it. And the one he forgot, the one he ran off, the granddaughter he did not count, she was the land too, and she came home. The Lord did not give me back my daughter. He did not give me back the years I let go quiet, but he sent me Brenda's girl, with her mother's eye for detail and her grandfather's steady hands at the exact hour I needed her, and she read the one page that saved everything. If you are listening to this, and there is somebody in your family you have let go quiet, a grandmother, a granddaughter, somebody you were too proud or too hurt to call, well, you know what I am going to say. They may be sitting at a kitchen table right now, hoping the phone will ring. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I read every one. Call them.
Do not wait for a letter to come in the mail by mistake.